And welcome back. Now, the president was in China for a 4-day official visit, which saw him meet the president of that country. And he also had different meetings with stakeholders and like-minded individuals in that country who are also planning to invest back home. But the question is, what are some of the goodies that the right back home? Let's just interrogate that one. One of the most notable one is now the construction of the Rironi-Mau Summit Road, which is initially it was supposed to go to this regime. What would you make of the president's basket? What do we have in that basket as he's coming back home?
Yeah, so the basket is, as usual.
First of all, how would you, let's start where we should. How would you to China?
Victor, to be honest, that visit was good, but not necessary.
Good, but not necessary.
Yeah, in my view.
Okay.
So good in terms of dealing with some of the global concerns that, of course, that the world has around trading with the East or the West, and that Kenya needed to, cement a position, especially based on the relationships between the former president of the United States. What we see with the U.S. and Kenya relations in the backdrop of the funding lapses from U.S., particularly through USAID, and some of the programs that the U.S. government was investing in Kenya, rather in the world, in the region, in the continent, and specifically here in Kenya. So coupled with that is the analysis or the traction that Kenya has had based on the initial debts or initial visits that we have had, either in the East or in the West, and now with this particular one, for the President William Ruto's visit in China. And so you ask yourself, what is our public debt to GDP ratio? At 55% right now. The laws that are passed by Parliament indicate that we can no longer of borrowing, and there has been a public clamor, Victor, around Kenyans asking is meant for. And I remember that one time President Uhuru Kenyatta to share documentation on SGR, and that people would be ready documents. So Kenyans are also concerned about public information on debt, even before we begin. It needs to be open to the citizens around Hizi Pesa and what these monies are doing, so that Kenyans are able to relate with as a country against now the borrowings, like what we see happening just a few days ago. And lastly is, of course, Parliament has been very now active on this particular matter. We saw a few days ago, for example, MP for Omondi, I hope that's correct, asking questions on the role of the Auditor General insofar as auditing public debt. And I'm keenly looking at auditing all these debts from independence up to probably where we are at in 2025.
Let me ask a layman. The President secured 194 billion shillings majorly for infrastructure. That's meant to extend the SG right now all the way to Uganda. Of course, this is going to unlock a lot of potential when it comes to trade.
Yes.
But, Kevin, are we able, as a country, without going east or west?
If you give Kenya...
Is our economy able to sustain that?
Right now, probably no. And especially because we are still grappling with transferring money to counties from national government. And if you look at 197 billion, is almost half of what goes to county governments. And that the monies that even get to county governments compared to what we call on-source revenue, which we already spoke about, is very... 197 is very little compared to the potential for counties to generate their own revenue, which per year. So if you were to build the capacity of counties, Victor, and we exercise judicious management and usage of financial resources, we would not really have to borrow money for us to do infrastructural development or just generally develop the country. And this is possible because counties are also organized now according to regional economic blocks. So if you want to have a railway line, for example, between Mau Summit, Rironi, all the way to Malaba, you ask yourself, what is the traction of the counties along that particular line?
Yes.
And then what is the potential of those counties, so that we develop a plan between national government and these county governments to put in resources in a basket. And if you tell Kenyans who struggle really to use to use that line, particularly for domestic tourism, we are going to have things like regional integration within the East African region, and even now new markets are SGR between Nairobi to look at towns along that stretch which were never there.
Yeah.
And now the degree of business that fight to the Western Link now, people will be excited. And Kenyans, like it happens in other countries, they also even might open up an M-Pesa account and say, oh yeah, we want to do this. And so kila mtu, ikipata 60 bob, weka hapo. If you get 300, weka hapo. And those big businessmen and women who are already investing along that stretch might put in hundreds of millions. And we have local resource generation for Kenyans putting in an infrastructure which does not require that we borrow money. But of course, borrowing is also political. There are lots of things that happen with the and even domestic borrowing. So the details, I think, are in quote unquote, as they say, the devil is in the details. But as the president returns back to the country, we are hoping that this is going to be a big heated debate, so that we can know this 197 billion, ni nini, for how long, and what is the plan.
And of course, someone also asked that it's a double. You have but you have debt repayment, which some of them are domestic. Some of them are maturing, international debts that, talk about it. But then now, we also need infrastructure, development, and all that. Where do we draw that, equilibrium so that it's at par?
So where we draw that equilibrium, Victor, is in the return of investment, which means that, for example, what will Kenyans get ultimately when we have built the railway? Again, to build a railway, again, it's going to China within a week, and you have money that comes back. Then you start recouping that money into putting in the infrastructure. It is easier to say, go and borrow, and then we can talk about the details later, which is what I think that the government has opted to do. And remember that also political, which is part of the politics in development.
Yes.
So President William Ruto's term will not wait for 60 years for him to achieve what he promised.
It's political in what sense?
It is political in the sense that when the president campaigns to his people, he is giving promises. So these promises must be fulfilled within his term. And his term is not going up to 60 years, for example, for Kenyans to raise their own money to build this railway. His term is 10 years. If we say, of course, it's 5 years. So if God is so if the president is interested, and I think this is something that President William Ruto has talked about over and over again, the expansion of Mau Summit, taking this SGR all the way to Malaba and all that. So he is keen to ensure in the bedrock, him and the former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, he wants to get something that he can go back with. In Africa, he has something to go back and show for people and for what he said.
You're putting it as a political carrot that is being dangled. Look, we talk of the political, it's more political. Is it political when it comes to two nations, Kenya and China? The relationship, strong between these two countries. I mean, the relationship between way back before even independence, and here we are.
Yes.
So is it also political?
Victor, in the sense that if you look at global relationships between countries and regions, and you even push it further to just two countries, the US and China, against things that have also gone on in the economy, going to give rebates, we are going to give discounts of our goods, and that we are going to almost issue free air tickets, you know. So people would easily move from the bulk of goods. These are common things, just like a market can decide to say, we are going to provide that is sold in our market for a specific period of time, maybe 2 weeks or 1 month.
Yes.
And so at that level, the global level, economies are political, and especially now when we talk about African countries, they are much more political than you can imagine. And that is why Kenya must also be able to be keen to look at how the country strengthens her relationships or its relationships with the US or the West. Of course, is Europe, among others, and then also with China and other countries. We don't want to go into the details of Russia. We don't want to go into, for example, what Kenya is doing in Haiti and all. Yeah, so all those things relate to this thing we are. Because management of relationships between two countries or even two people is political. Ukinipatia chai hivi, you know, tea is also very political. It's also supposed to pacify me and make me feel like my host has done me justice for my time here. So if you look at it in that manner, for Kenya as a country, our interest must be in, for that particular time, what are we reaping? What are we benefiting?
I mean, come on, you and I would understand the nitty-gritties of what is that basket.
Yes.
But Wanjiku is really quite impatient.
Yeah.
He wants that instant coffee. Okay, umetoka China, sawa, all right. So what can I see? That instant is what makes a big difference.
Yes.
While it might give some reprieve in terms of the political lifeline, but the instant result.
Yes.
Is it in the communication from? Is it in the implementation of the projects that the president went to China, came back with some money, and now we are having the projects running?
And you're very right, Victor. The communication largely is what a lot of times has made governments, and particularly our Kenyan governments, both to really fail in terms of pacifying the common citizen. So that right now, it is not in the interest of Kenyans that politicians are breaking down President William Ruto's visit to China. It needs to be given to people who understand what that visit is about, what the president said, and to put everything in the open.
You know, when mothers come back from the market,
yes,
the basket is full.
Correct.
Chukue nduma weka pale, chukue nyanya weka pale.
Yes.
You know, you're emptying that basket for everybody to see. Nguru hapo, you'll ask mama, wapi nguru iko wapi hapo? You know, there is that thing.
Or even things that, you know, when the mother is leaving and you are crying, they are saying, Mami, twende na wewe. You know, the mother says, usijali, I'm going to bring you peremende so that you stay. And so Kenyans also have peremendes that they are asking government. And if you look at, for example, the priority list of this peremende as an example of Kenyans, is probably not in the basket of what has come from China, just as an example. Like Kenyans are saying, health must work. When we began this segment, you were saying schools are opening, but there are challenges with education. But if you look at the 197 are much more relevant right now, that the people who are emptying this basket are able to explain. And I promised you, I'm sorry, si kubeba sababu mvua ilianza kunyesha, and so I was scared that if I carry it, it might melt. That will pacify this mtoto, because otherwise the sukari nguru, the nyanya, the nduma, and all those things, they'll be there, but the of the child. So
the child is so interested in the
peremende, which you didn't come with, but you said you are going to come with it. And that is common in our families. Sometimes I leave the house and the child is crying. I know that they like chocolates. And some like, usijali, I'll bring you chocolate. So whatever, of course, you know that this is also But it's a good example because we make this China basket or President Ruto's visits, which have now been too much, you know, between his first term. Actually, this is his first term. If you look at the nations that the president has visited and what he has come with, Kenyans are asking, where are these things? And so we don't need politicians. I've seen politicians, people who, you know, might not have the requisite technical knowledge to break what the president... So people in roads, for example, out there engaging with communities, particularly where this new line is going to pass through, so that they are able to see. The private sector, investors, people putting in major business premises, the government must have a plan to sit with them, whether in breakfast meetings or in conferences or whatever works well for government and those people. Visit for them. Once in a while, I've seen in my email being invited for Kenya-China relations meetings at Serena. And so you go there and you see very people from Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, from different Kenya private sector, people who, with a very clear program, Nambiwa, this thing, we did it, it means this. And so as Kevin,
there's a clear breakdown.
There's a clear breakdown of what you expect. So Kevin, who says, you raise your hand and you ask, but the president has gone to China this number of times. So tell us the benefits.
The government, now that the president is back, the communication team to have probably one of the dailies to give a breakdown of 4 billion shillings for manufacturing and all that.
Yes.
Is it even proper? Because I know governments sometimes work in, in secrecy, and the way it's kind of an amorphous, establishment. Mwananchi who really wants to understand, okay, the president was in China for 4 days, this is what he's come back with. What you're going to do between Nairobi and going to spend is this. All right? So Kenyans, it's out there in the public domain. Be patient and wait. The communication bit of it.
That is very, very critical. And like today I have seen is one of these 3 papers. One of them has a breakdown of the housing projects. How many have been built? What was the promise? Where are these and all that? How much will it cost? That is what the communications team, working with the parent ministries of government, the departments and the agencies, must do, so that Kenyans are able to relate with what the president went to issue. That will be number 1. Number 2, we cannot talk about secrecy in 2025 now, Victor, in the way Constitution of Kenya 2010, whose Article 35 talks about access to information. A very good ratifier of international conventions that has also ratified open government protocols that also relate to openness in engagement, particularly in access to information. So we must share information and no longer assume that that Kenyans that we have to be secret about some of these issues, and that is where now propaganda comes in. Because you see, for example, I saw last week people were posting a photo of one of the senators who was in, I think, he accompanied the president to China, and so the space of social media was clogged with some necessary but quite less important information. And it's largely because people do not understand why those people have to accompany the communications team. Can come back and say, the senators are very critical because they protect devolution. It is their responsibility. And some of these projects are going to be done in counties, etc., XYZ. It's a lot of sense. But you see, because of that lack of communication, lack of breaking it down, and even just properly educated level head, that communication is effective, it is ongoing. Sometimes, Victor, as I finish on this, I have empathized with the president when he 4 hours trying to convince Kenyans, mpaka anauliza kwani nyinyi hamuoni chenye mnafanya? They cannot see because it is not in their business to see. It is your people to help them to see. And helping the citizens to see is in breaking it down in a language that they can be able to understand. When we talk about multilateral debts or multilateral loans, now, to Mama Mboga kule nyumbani, or my mother who is a retired teacher, you talk about multilateralism, it is too deep and too heavy for her. Break it down in a language that is easy to, that is palatable, easy to engage, and that way the citizens will exercise their patriotic spirit to support government programs and also government projects. But if we assume that we have a handshake, the handshake will deal with all these issues, there's going to be a day when it cannot.
issue here. East or West? The big boys are watching. And
a compromise in terms of East-West and even the middle ground, especially in the wake of dwindling resources and financing from US. You know, Victor, we probably, maybe have not come across it, but I've sat in certain meetings where this has been discussed. The impact of US withdrawal of funding is huge.
Yeah.
And even when we talk about East or West, and we are going East, and then we bring in Europe and UK into the picture, of course, European Union, among others, the question is, will we really be able to fill? So East or West, let's have a middle ground. What we can get from the East that relates to clear priorities of the nation, fine. What the West can give that relates to priorities of the nation, very okay. And if you look at, you stretch it further again, Victor, there are good things that are coming from the West that might not be. Again, lots of good things that are coming
East
from
and West know very well.
Yes, they speak to each other. So, like security investments, I haven't seen China, for example, investing in Kenya's security. But if you look at the West and what, for example, the US is doing with our defense forces, the security infrastructure, a compromise middle ground that provides an effective, stable ground, both for their benefits and also for local benefits. So mutual engagement that provide for mutual
Is Kenya
benefits.
one of these beautiful brides for East and West? Are we that, that darling to East and West? If you can compare that as an example.
That I think I'm aware about it, I'll say yes. Global toll in this region, whether it's East and Central Africa, whether it's just Africa as a country. And if you draw the map of Africa, you have MENA, the Middle East and Northern American countries up there like Egypt, and you have South Africa. Then you go to your west, you have Nigeria, and then you go to the east where you have Kenya standing very strong. And if you look at that particular map and the investments of global institutions like the UN, there is no other, those 4 countries that I've mentioned, a UN complex like what Kenya is doing. And if you look at, despite the challenges that we have with Haiti, there is no good reason as to why Kenya would have been interested in Haiti, and we are seeing, again, those global big boys, as you call them, supporting that particular mission. So there are good things, including infrastructural investment in ICT. I am sure that you cannot compare the ICT in it is happening with Nigeria, where sometimes internet just shuts down. And here in Kenya, we are alive 24/7. Of course, we are not.
So there's this cliche question. Is here all these other, potential suitors, Kenya being this beautiful bride?
I think one of those things that we are bringing to the table is an economic hub. That these countries, again, with our international airport here,
quite attractive.
Of course, have tourism, very vibrant. You have all these expatriates coming in because we have talked about the installations. By the way, Victor, there are lots of high commissions and embassies here in Nairobi, Kenya, that stand and relate to other countries also. High commissioners here who are resident in Kenya, but they're also in countries having, yes, they are domiciled here in Nairobi. So that, of course, also shows some very basic potential that Kenya is a place to be. Kenya is a country to have, and that Kenya is really that partner that you do not want to miss on that particular.
Been unpacking what was the president's basket from his China tour, and we hope that, as you've correctly put it, the communication bit of it, and just to have a breakdown on what happened, on where the president, what the president is carrying back home, is the most important thing. One more thing I want us to do, on the front page of the Daily Nation, what I have there, 5 billion shillings a day debt. The nation's been broken down on what was on President Kibaki's government, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and finally President William Ruto's 5 billion shillings a day debt stress for Ruto. What do you have on the front page of the Daily Standard?
So UDA's tax evasion. Secretary General.
Yes.
And looking at this, they're talking about funds to UDA from Exchequer. And if you move further, they are saying that there are expectations that UDA is supposed to be having to remit certain resources. We have cities poor sell affordable units.
Oh, you talked about it.
Yes.
Cities poor sell affordable housing units.
Yeah, so how expensive they are and how we are also not meeting the targets. And I think the CS of housing has also been in your show or some of these platforms to indicate that we are not meeting that particular target. But that is the headline from the Star.
Very good. All right. That's how we wrap it up. Thank you so much. So you can take a look or buy your favorite local daily for more details. My name is Victor Lo. Thank you so much for watching. Taking a break. Vivian is up next. Stay with us.